All right, here we go. Hollywood Reporter. Look at these ads, y'all. Was there not a way for me to turn that off? I really wish I knew technology, but I don't. So you're stuck. Okay, here we go. The Age of Disclosure Review. Dan Farah's polished doc legitimizes unverifiable theories about UFOs. Politicians, military officials, and scientists discuss non-human intelligence. And when will it be time to tell the world the truth in this doc premiering at South by Southwest? In documentaries, accuracy is informational. The presentation of data and testimony in a way that's persuasive and unimpeachable. Legitimacy, however, is aesthetic. The presentation of data or testimony in a way that looks truthful. Dan Farah's new documentary, The Age of Disclosure, is big on legitimacy. Damn. I mean, that. Oh. Okay, here we go. Here we go. This one. Yeah. All right. Almost. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I like this. Okay, here we go. Almost nothing in the Age of Disclosure is, quote, new per se. The documentary uses 34 talking heads from various levels of the government, military, and intelligence community to allege a deep state conspiracy covering up interactions with non-human intelligent life and technology of non-human origin going back 80 years. Many of the people in the documentary have testified before Congress about what they say they know. And more than a couple of them have been in previous documentaries and docuseries recounting their stories with the same level of personal conviction. What's likely to set the Age of Disclosure apart, at least for some viewers, isn't that it's more accurate than your average Unsolved Mysteries or Ancient Alien style quickie, but that it looks more legitimate. Over 109 minutes, and it feels much longer. The Age of Disclosure tackles its topic with utmost certainty and sincerity. Its interview subjects treating everything they say like it's established fact, not requiring corroboration or confirmation. Oh, what the? Where is it? Okay. It took nearly an hour into the documentary before Farah's debating tactic began to get on my nerves, before it became clear that the approach is a rhetorical dead end. Of course, that's just what somebody in on the deep state conspiracy would say about a documentary that blew the lid off of the deep state conspiracy. So you can feel free to ignore me. TV critics, after all, have a deep investment in only believing that the truth is out there when it's being delivered by David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, and then the proceeds are benefiting wealthy oligarchs. If you've been paying attention to the news in recent years, you've perhaps noticed a growing willingness from people at some level of power to discuss the existence of what we used to call UFOs, but now call unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, presumably because the term UFO was accompanied by decades of stigmatizing and science fiction coding. With Lou Elizondo, member of the government's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, and Jay Stratton, director of the government's UAP task force, among the primary guiding forces, the doc leads us through the existence of UAPs, the recent efforts to legitimize investigation into those UAPs, the powerful figures who have become the public face of those investigations, and the even more powerful figures working behind the scenes to delegitimize those investigations in order to keep people from ever learning the truth. The title refers to the point at which some figure of authority will finally come forward and tell the American people what we deserve to know. It's fully assumed that if disclosure were to occur, it would emanate from the United States. The assembled talking heads include several military figures who previously testified to Congress about their experiences with UAPs, several scientists who work with the UAP task force, and a whole bunch of politicians who have to be very, very careful about how credulous they appear. Those include Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Mike Rounds, and a whole bunch of Congress people. Regardless of your ideological stripe, you're supposed to find it legitimizing for each of the fringier figures in the documentary to be proximate to a sitting Secretary of State, a former Director of National Intelligence, General Jim Clapper, or a sitting representative who has recently reopened the investigation into the Kennedy assassination, Anna Paulina Luna. Okay, so maybe legitimizing is a little self-selecting, like the news clips corroborating how mainstream some of the documentary claims are, clips that lean heavily into News Nation exclusives. That's interesting. There's a lot of News Nation clips in there. But at least this guy's talking about the film, right? Not like the other one. Even the documentary's heroes seem impressed with how they're being treated. At one point, one of the science-y guys is amazed to be conducting interviews in the Senate building. Each interview is filmed in the most official or book-filled facility possible because Farah knows that those backdrops suggest something that filming in a dark basement or in front of a yarn-filled conspiracy wall would not. Blair Mowat's score adds sobriety at every turn, even when it's accompanying generic stock footage or images of Luis Elizondo wandering through different Beltway landmarks, making it clear that this is a man who, in repose, seeks out the wisdom that can only be found inside the Jefferson Memorial. My problem with the age of disclosure isn't the lack of opposing voices. It's that there couldn't be experts debunking anything here. Nothing is proven, and thus nothing can be refuted. If someone insists without evidence that there's an underground bunker somewhere with 1,000 alien bodies and 50 alien spacecraft, it's possible for anybody to refute, because what are they going to say? No, there isn't, or, well, you just don't have the clearance to know. If someone insists without evidence that people they can't name were killed to keep certain things that they can't say secret, what are you going to say? Anytime somebody mentions vague events or details that have long been in the public record, they're quick to mention how much more they know that they can't disclose. And what can you say to that? Nuh-uh. Anytime anybody starts sounding really wild, that's a good time to mention that the deep state, or the so-called legacy project, quote, has been spreading disinformation forever, calling anybody who dares to make claims a crackpot. I've been called a crackpot, and I'm skeptical, about a lot. I'm not even there yet. It's interesting. It's one thing for interview subjects to treat the details of an Area 51 Roswell as established fact. You'll never see a better embodiment of the actual definition of begging the question. But when the scientists start doing the same for speculation on how UAPs defy various terrestrial physical laws, I went from being intrigued and generally buying what Farah was selling to realizing this is just a basic cable exploitation doc done up with the fancy gloss. Once wanton speculation was the order of the day, I wish more time could have been spent on the ramifications of the title. What would disclosure look like practically? What would the economic and sociological and geopolitical ripples look like? What's a feasible timetable for disclosure and its impact? But no, the age of disclosure is more interested in nebulous phraseology like the greatest paradigm shift in human history, quote. Some viewers will happily celebrate the fantasy when it looks this legitimate. And there we go. That would be cool to have in a document, right? What does disclosure look like? Its impact, all of that. That's interesting. That's not in there. But I mean, they had a goal for what they were trying to do with the documentary. So it's just time-wise, right? It was to get the base facts down. This is according to Dan Farah. His goal was to get the base facts down for this, for the UAP, right? With 34 government officials or former government officials on record. Boom, right? All together. That's not done. Lay down the base facts. So maybe they did talk about a part 2, part 3, part 4. I don't know, right? The age of post-disclosure, that's the sequel, y'all. After we get disclosure, you know what I mean? And that's what they talk about, post-disclosure. Because that's really what those questions mean. Post-disclosure, what does the world look like? So, okay, that's the Hollywood Reporter. And I have one more from IndieWire. All right, we're going to take a look at it, and then that's it. Very interesting. Hollywood Reporter and Variety have put out 2 bad reviews. But I have a feeling that, like on Rotten Tomatoes, for instance, when there's enough reviews and everything gets on there, I think the critic score may be a little low, but the audience score is probably going to be through the roof on this. Because again, that first review from Variety, the guy barely talked about the film. I'm not saying I don't agree with some of the stuff he was saying, but that has review the film. This, at least the Hollywood Reporter, he did review the film. You may not like the review, but that was at least a review. And we learn things about the film. And then from there, you can decide what to do with it, right? He at least tells you what happens, some of the stuff. Then from there, you can interpret it because he interprets it in his review. It's amazing how reviews get so personal. I guess that's how you got to like start separating yourself, right? From the crowd. I guess they throw that stuff in there. I get it. All right, here we go. IndieWire. The age of disclosure. You know what? I need a little coffee, y'all. I've been talking a lot. All right. The Age of Disclosure Review, a case for alien life that's far more serious than anything we've seen before. South by Southwest, the 34 military and intelligence veterans interviewed about their knowledge of alien encounters offer the most convincing argument you can make without showing any actual evidence. That's interesting. It's by Christian Zilko. I mean, I wouldn't really expect evidence to show up in a documentary. But all right, let's there we go. What is this thing? Here we go, y'all. Figuring this out. All right, that looks good. The first few years of the 2020s have seen the debate over whether humanity is alone in the universe evolve from a far-fetched distraction to a pressing bipartisan issue. An increasing amount of military encounters with flying objects that defy all laws of existing human technology has led many of the most serious leaders we have left to start seriously considering the prospect that alien civilizations have made their way to Earth. That led to 2 of the first public congressional hearings about alien sightings in 50 years, with representatives from both sides of the aisle grilling former Pentagon officials about what the military knows and isn't telling us about what we now call unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, because UFO is apparently passé. It's ironic that a rise in seemingly credible evidence of alien encounters has coincided with our media ecosystem turning into a free-for-all that allows conspiracy theorists of every stripe to spew bullshit without consequences. I mean, that's true. If you haven't been paying attention, you'd be forgiven for assuming that a new documentary about the Pentagon's alleged encounters with aliens was Roganite nonsense that's best ignored by anyone who hasn't pre-ordered UFC 314 yet. No, well, I take shots. I like UFC. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with UFC? But first-time documentarian Dan Farah is determined to convince you otherwise with The Age of Disclosure, which features 34 former military and intelligence officials speaking on the record about what they see as compelling evidence that alien civilizations pose a geopolitical threat that needs to be further studied. Elected officials from both parties, many of whom are known for their serious foreign policy chops, also appear in the documentary to emphasize that the issue deserves serious attention. The evidence for UAPs begins with the claim that certain flying objects picked up by American military radar in recent years couldn't possibly have been made by humans. For one, the fastest aircrafts known to mankind max out at around 5,000 miles per hour, while UAPs have been seen traveling at nearly 10 times that speed. They're also allegedly able to stop on a dime in midair and make turns at sharp right angles that would be impossible for any jet that we designed. Combine that with a puzzling lack of environmental emissions and strange medical after effects on people who encounter them, and it begins to seem like we're dealing with something from beyond this world. People who have seen UAPs also make similar claims about their appearance, often describing the vehicles as massive matte black prisms housed inside giant floating bubbles. The fact that many of these alleged sightings have taken place around military bases have led many, including UAP whistleblower and Age of Disclosure main character Luis Elizondo, to believe that extraterrestrial civilizations are actively trying to study our military and nuclear capabilities. A former Pentagon counterintelligence official who claims to have researched UAPs as a director of the Classified Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, Elizondo says he resigned his position due to his belief that the Pentagon wasn't treating the issue with the seriousness it deserved. While he and the military officials who back him up refuse to disclose classified information, they claim that the declassified tidbits are enough to justify the commitment of significantly more resources to the UAP problem. Elizondo serves as the film's protagonist and narrator, detailing the scientific evidence for UAPs, the geopolitical threat they pose, and what he sees as the United States military's longstanding refusal to treat them as a serious issue. He claims that the Pentagon has overseen a decade-spanning UAP investigation known as the Legacy Program, with career bureaucrats protecting sensitive information by keeping it out of the hands of presidents who might feel compelled to impulsively blab about it. The film makes no comment on who that might be. In his view, many of the powers that be have a vested interest in keeping knowledge of UAPs a secret, and we're all the suckers who will pay a price for their arrogance. That line of thinking eventually succumbs to the Achilles heel that brings down so many promising conspiracy theories. Individual components are compelling and credible, but linking them all together into a worldview that simplifies our endlessly complex society into a single good versus evil narrative requires gaps in logic. I'm willing to entertain the idea that certain people in the U.S. military have viewed conclusive evidence of alien technology. I'm even open to the notion that parts of the Pentagon might have felt the need to hide such information from other branches of the military and government that could have used it. But you lose me once you start insisting there's a shadow government that has spent 80 years colluding with defense contractors to hide aliens from the public by funding Hollywood movies that portray UFO observers as nutcases who lack credibility. The scientific claims are interesting enough on their own, but anyone who has encountered enough human nature should be able to tell you that we're just not that good at cooperating and keeping secrets. Farah is a little too willing to let his subjects veer into conspiracy territory at times, but I think those tangents can be forgiven for two reasons. For one, they're not spreading anything truly harmful or inciting audiences to take any dangerous actions. But more importantly, it all builds towards the rather reasonable goal from which the film takes its name: disclosure. Farah is primarily advocating for our government to show its hand to the public by revealing the status of Jesus. What the? Sorry, y'all. It just jumped on me. I did not do that. Okay, here we go. Farah is primarily advocating for our government to show its hand to the public by revealing the status of its many investigations into alien life. And regardless of their findings, it now seems evident that such investigations have taken place. Whether that information turns life into a sci-fi movie or forces us to come to terms with mundanity doesn't change the fact that people have a right to know what's going on. That's a point that should be able to unite the most diehard alien truthers and the skeptics who are sick of hearing about this. As someone who has never been persuaded by anything that I've ever heard about aliens before watching the film, I feel qualified to tell you that the Age of Disclosure is really, really convincing. The amount of military officials who share detailed corroborating stories of alien encounters and congresspeople who vouch for the credibility of their claims make this feel like a documentary with front page news potential. Of course, there's still the problem of never being able to see this classified evidence, and each viewer will have to decide how many generals swearing that they've seen aliens with their own eyes is enough to convince them. And for some, no amount of adamant testimony will ever be enough. But nevertheless, it feels fair to say that the Age of Disclosure makes a more serious argument for the idea that we've had close encounters with the third kind than any documentary that preceded it. Grade B+. That's a great score. All right. I mean, he kind of closes it out with something I think we can all agree with, which is this deserves to be investigated. Let's see the findings. Let's be transparent. And whatever the findings are, we'll all accept it. I mean, that seems pretty fair on a base level, right? That anyone can get behind. There's clearly things flying around we don't know, worthy of investigation. Jumping to its alien, yeah, that's another conversation. I agree. But again, got a lot of credible people saying that that's what's happening. So, all right. Well, there's 3 reviews for the age of disclosure.